Running 37 is easy, except for one major annoyance. How do I carry this giant spare? If I don't want to give up a whole bunch of bed space, my only option will be some type of swing-out carrier. Because according to the internet, a 37 is simply too big to fit underneath. But if that is true, what's this then? In this video, I will show you how I managed to squeeze it in, why it may not be for everyone, and why I try so hard to avoid a swing-out carrier. Alright, let's get started. My RCSB Tundra came with a custom dual-tip exhaust, which sounds pretty cool, but it left almost no room even around the 32-inch spare. So before I could even try fitting a 37, I had to do something about my exhaust. This Tundra is primarily an overlander, but I still want to do some technical wheeling if I want to. So I was thinking an axle dump exhaust for maximum clearance, like that on the Trailhunter. But because of how the aftermarket muffler was positioned, removing the tailpipes will leave the muffler unsupported. So I cut out the entire catback to start from scratch. The question is, what exhaust should I get? When I need to drive over 12 hours a day for long trips, then pull into a campsite late at night, I want my truck as quiet as possible. So I actually picked up and used factory exhaust for $50 on Facebook Marketplace. Because my regular cab short bed has a 20-inch shorter wheelbase, I cut off a large section of the midpipe. The new exhaust was for a 5.7-liter V8, which has slightly larger pipes than that for my 4.7-liter. But they just happen to fit snugly over each other like they were designed to. I then leathered the joint with exhaust sealant, then tightened them down with stainless steel clamps. Unlike the aftermarket muffler, the factory one had a hanger right at the end, so even without any tailpiece, it was fully supported. The question is, should I do a turn-down tip like that on the Trailhunter? My intuition told me no, because I believed the main purpose for that was to add this hanger for structural support. But my Tundra already had one on the muffler, so not having any tip means even better clearance. As expected, my truck got a lot quieter, which was exactly what I want. Wait a minute, that doesn't look too good. Upon closer inspection, the exhaust gas shot straight into the axle housing and splattered all over the place. So as it turned out, that little turn down was actually very necessary. But most off-the-shelf tips stick out way too much. So I grabbed a section of 3-inch pipe from a previous project and trim it as close to the bend as possible. And to secure it in place, I drilled 2 release holes and cut 2 slots near the end. This allows my exhaust clamp to collapse the diameter and grab onto the muffler. Now that is a high clearance tip. It was much better than before. Now, I'm sure some of you are worried about heat. So did I. Although Toyota put an axle dump on the new Trailhunter, that truck has a turbo 4-cylinder with much better thermal efficiency, which means a lot lower exhaust gas temperature than my old school cast iron block V8. So should I do anything about it? We'll circle back later in this video, but now it's finally time to test fit the 37 spare. At this point, I still have very little confidence this will work at all, so I didn't order the 5th tire. That was why I was using this tire for this experiment. But to my surprise, it went in a lot further than I thought. 37 spare under the 2nd gen Tundra. So what's hitting? Right now it's biased all the way against the hitch. The front, we have plenty of clearance to the rear diff. Benefit of not having a panhard bar. The exhaust hanger can be cut off. Those stock spare tire mounts can be cut off. And here is a better view of those things. We're off to a good start. So anyway, I started cutting. I used a sawzall to chop off the big pieces and clean up the edges with an angle grinder. For the exhaust hanger, I cut off the bare minimum and retained as much as possible. Because either if the 37 did not fit, or my axle dump got too hot, I still want a way out. After trimming these three things, I was actually able to hoist the 37 all the way up. No way, am I all set? Well, not quite. Right now, the spare is biased all the way back against the hitch, and it was hitting the leaf spring shackles on both sides. The leaf spring itself cleared on the passenger side, but it just started to rub on the driver's side. Now, the leaf spring is narrower in the back and spread wider apart in the front. So in theory, if we move the spare forward, we should gain a little more clearance. And we do have quite a bit of room to go. So let's give that a try. To mock it up, I use a piece of wood and shift the spare 3/4 inch forward. It barely kisses it. And this side, the leaf spring not touching. This side, shackle is barely kissing it. Leaf spring is touching. Okay, looks like we just need to shift it a little more. But there's one more thing we have to check. Using a floor jack to support the axle, I lowered the truck down to its right height. And you can see the shackle pivots backwards as the suspension compresses, which means the rear diff will move slightly backwards towards the spare. I then use a strap as a plumb bob to check how much clearance I have to the diff. The spare was already on the diff. And remember, this was just right height. At full compression, the axle will shift further backwards. So turns out I didn't have nearly as much room as I thought. If the diff made contact with the spare, it will be way worse than the shackles touching at full droop. So to choose the lesser of the two evils, I shifted the spare all the way back to make room for the diff. And for the shackles, they only touch the spare near suspension full droop. And even then, they only touch a little bit. So maybe it's fine? At this point, I ran out of ideas. So I went ahead and ordered the 5th tire, mounted underneath, and started driving. Over the next 6 months and 6,000 miles, my 37-inch spare saw plenty of suspension cycles in all kinds of terrain. Yeah, oh my god, holy crap! So let's see how it held up. First, I can confirm the rear diff never made contact with the spare, which was good. But what about the shackles? Boy, it didn't leave a mark. Well, the driver's side leaf spring did leave some mark because it was constantly touching. But still, it was very minimal. Way less than when the rubber hits the road. So I would say this was a success. But what about the exhaust? For the past 6 months, I've actually been carrying a thermal camera to monitor heat. Whether it was after a long highway drive, hours of slow speed off-road, or continuous idling, the hottest temperature I observed was after hours of highway driving in 100-degree weather. But that was simply the normal temperatures of these conditions. There was no hotspot behind the exhaust. So the axle dump exhaust was also a success. Basically, all I did to fit the 37-inch spare were remove the factory tailpipe, cut off the 2 factory guide tab, and cut off half of this exhaust hanger. And that was it. Now, I know what you're thinking. If it was truly this easy, how come no one else did it and posted it on the internet? So let me explain why this may not be for everyone. In the context of Tundras, if you have the new 3rd generation, then forget it. The panhard bar on the new 5-link rear suspension sticks out a good few inches. But even if you have a 2nd gen like me, this still may not work for you. Most 2nd gens, or at least the one people like to modify, has the 5.7 liter engine, which comes with a massive 10.5 inch rear diff. Meanwhile, my 4.7 liter is paired with a smaller 9.5 inch rear diff. As we saw earlier, my small rear diff barely cleared the 37, so the 10.5 will most likely hit. But even if you have the 9.5 inch rear diff, there is one more thing that could hold you up. My 37s are kind of special. They are 37 by 11.5, which is narrower than the common 37 by 12.5 or 13.5. An interesting characteristic of narrow and tall tires is that they tend to have a more pronounced crown. And this crown profile just so happened to match up perfectly with the shape of the shackles. If I had a regular 37 with a more squared off profile, it will probably hit the wider part of the shackle and interfere with the suspension. Basically, it was out of sheer coincidence that everything worked out for me.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect.
Nevertheless, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. For starters, I am now locked in to Nitto tires. As of right now, they are the only brand who makes narrow 37s. Fortunately, the Recon Grapplers has been a good tire, so I'm not complaining. But I will also be limited in what type of shackles I can run. Something like this will definitely not fit. And at last, accessing the spare is not that convenient. The hoist is kinda slow, and I still have to drag the tire from underneath. There we go. So with all that trade-off, why did I still insist on putting it under the bed? Why not just run a swing-out carrier like a normal overlander? Let me explain. To clarify, I'm not saying that swing-out carriers are so bad that everyone should avoid them. If your spare simply doesn't fit underneath, you do what you gotta do. But if I had the option, I would try very hard not to run one, and there are 4 main reasons. First, convenience. Yes, a swing-out carrier does make accessing the spare a lot easier, and you can mount more stuff on top. But it will make accessing the tailgate a lot more cumbersome. I need to access my tailgate a lot more than I need to change a spare, so I like to keep it as painless as possible. Second, weight. My 37 weighs 96 pounds, so keeping it underneath gives me the lowest center of mass. It is also positioned closer to the rear axle for better weight distribution. And don't forget, the swing out itself also adds weight, from just below 100 pounds for a hitch mount carrier to well over 200 pounds for a full bumper replacement. All that will count towards your gross vehicle weight rating. But for me, I actually got a pound of weight saving. The third reason is stability.
That's a lot, man.
Most swing arms are pretty well supported in these 2 directions. But if you look at the third direction, front to back, it is pretty much a diving board. Most swing outs I have seen have this oscillation front to back. It was not rattling from something being loose. It was actually the whole structure flexing about its natural frequency. Now, I know this has been fine for most overlanders, but mechanical resonance will make things less predictable. It's not so much about how hard you hit it. Rather, it's about how close you are from its natural frequency. In this case, it was actually the Toyota 8-track triggering the resonance. A tiny input will result in large movement. And there are countless other conditions that can trigger resonance, and most of them are out of your control. In comparison, the spare underneath is cradled by this crossmember at all four corners, and it is held in place with preload. It is much more stable in all directions. The last reason is clearance. This is mostly an issue for hitch-mounted swingouts as they simply stick out a lot. Now, you would think putting it underneath is also bad for clearance. But as you can see, my spare was almost invisible and makes no compromises to my departure angle. This was again thanks to the narrow tire. If it was the more common 37 by 12.5 or 13.5, the spare will hang 1 to 2 inches lower. So just another benefit of narrow tires. In fact, this was one of my 3 key secrets to clear 37s with no lift and no body mount chop. If you want to learn more about that, go check out this video. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.